We are starting the session that is entitled Ownership, Integrity and Transparency in Recovery. My name is Urisa Lutsevich. I am the head of Ukraine Forum at Chatham House. It's a London-based think tank. But I am that part of global Ukrainian community that is trying to ensure that Ukraine wins this war and that Ukraine, meanwhile, can prepare itself for a very important process of winning the peace. And that means giving the future to the generation of Ukrainians who are going now through this war, and millions of them also who are abroad. So we are on the record. There's a live stream of this session. So there's much larger audiences than just this cube. Please use the headsets. They are here for two things. One is one of our panelists will speak Ukrainian, and also it will help you hear all of us better because of the outside noise. We don't have a lot of time, and we have a lot of great speakers today that I was thinking, preparing for this session, really represent almost everybody who has to be at the table. We have the national level government, Serhiy Derkach, who is the Deputy Minister for Economies, Territory, for Communities, Territories and Infrastructure, based in Kyiv. That is the top level government. We also have Alan Prach-Kirstensen, who is representing one of the largest donors projects working on tackling, preventing and eradicating corruption in Ukraine that is funded by the European Union. Alan, welcome. We also have Olena Halushka, who is representing one of the leading Ukrainian anti-corruption civil society organizations with a decade of experience. They're not coming, new kids on the block, so to speak, but somebody who has been working way back trying to identify loopholes for corruption and closing them down. A very determined group of ladies and gentlemen. We also have next to Olena Victor Nestula, who is actually enabling closing some of the loopholes for corruption through the digital tools, and he is the head of Ukraine support at Open Contracting Partnership Initiative. Welcome. And next to him we have Ruslan Kravchenko, who is the head of Kyiv Oblast Military Administration, but also has experience in a prosecution, law enforcement, so he kind of knows more of an accountability part of eradicating corruption, I would say. Welcome, Ruslan. Next to Ruslan, we have Svetlana Kravchenko. Svetlana Olshanska, who is the deputy mayor of Zhytomyr, and that is the city level, the level where I would say in many cases people either feel that government is working on their behalf and doing what it has to be, or perhaps representing not their interest, and where I would say also the kind of embezzlement and corruption is more visible than at the national level. And last but not least, we have Ann Lee, who is the CEO of the CORE, which is the humanitarian initiative that was set up jointly with Sean Penn, and they are actually here from the first days of war providing both humanitarian assistance and right now thinking long-term about how these communities who have been impacted by war can actually regain life back and become more resilient. So this is an amazing panel, and I would like to start right away addressing Deputy Minister to tell us what are the measures that, knowing that how much demand for justice and anti-corruption there is in Ukraine, we do know people want to get rid of this malaise. What measures are you taking at the national level to reassure that funds that are coming both from Ukrainian taxpayers and from Western donors are actually spent and allocated transparently? Over to you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I would say that this topic that we are discussing in terms of integrity and accountability, the first question, why we are speaking about this. Firstly, I would say we are speaking about the transparency and accountability because we need to build a trust. And this is actually the main point. When we are talking about the Ministry of Infrastructure, we firstly say that we are building infrastructure of trust. This is the first step, basically. Trust of citizens to the government and to the, let's say, next our steps and the victory of Ukraine. Definitely the trust of international partners and investors to Ukraine that we are capable to manage all the recovery and restoration projects. That's the basically why we are actually speaking about it. Coming to the precise actions and activities what the ministry is taking and all the agencies which are taken, I will name very shortly because we have colleagues who are helping us, and I would say this is not only the purely ministerial actually success or activities. This is the actually joint efforts, and thanks actually for the international partners, for the donor organizations, for the NGOs in Ukraine which are working. Some of them are here, most of them are definitely right now in Ukraine, hopefully watching us today. And thanks to all of us, because this is the big team who is working on the recovery process, ensuring basically integrity and accountability. So starting from the very beginning, I would say we need to say that when we are talking about integrity and accountability, we need to speak also about the efficiency and effectiveness. So not only about that everything is very much transparent, but we are spending money to the particular point which is very much needed. And for this, actually, what the state is doing is the strategical level. So we formulated recently the national transport strategy, the national strategy for development of the border crossing points, the national strategy of regional development. Basically, this is all strategic level, ensuring effective and efficient recovery and reconstruction. Then if we'll go from the strategic level, then how actually we see what was damaged. So we actually created the register, the national register of the damaged and destroyed assets, where we can see precisely what was damaged. And we have the reports of people and organizations with the very comprehensive verification what was damaged. That's very important issue. Then we are coming for the next step. We know what was damaged. We have the strategy. Then how we need to actually activate the recovery and reconstruction projects. And for this purpose, first thing that we need to know how to prioritize, because we have the anonymous number of the assets which were damaged, and we have even much more needs right now because we want to build back better. So not necessarily we are rebuilding everything what was damaged. Sometimes we are building totally new roads or totally new border crossings because we do need to strive with our economy. So for this perspective, we have a very unique methodology, I would say, that what was created with the World Bank and with us, our NGO partners, that we have the methodology of prioritizing the projects of recovery and reconstruction with a very exhaustive list of criteria when the project goes to the top, and also together with the electronic system, which DREAM, which I will speak a bit later, and we have colleagues who will present the system, I think, much more. So that's about the prioritization, and that's how we firstly actually also eliminate corruption and very much transparently saying what projects are priority and need to be put into the first funding and then coming next. So when we are going down, then we are speaking about the digital tools, which definitely help because they will actually taken out the human mistake and actually gives an automized all the processes. So we have the geographical information system, which actually on the local level shows all the social economic life. And it's very transparent. You can see basically in the cities where we introduce it, particularly all the assets, who owns it, what needs to be rebuilt, what are the projects, who are constructing, and so on. So everything on the map. Second, very important database which we created. It's a DREAM. So we will speak about it today a bit more, but the DREAM is actually a very unique system. This is the special system which actually is like one-stop shop for initiating the project, then maintaining it and monitoring the project. So you can see all the projects right now in the DREAM system. It's almost 5,000 projects on recovery and reconstruction, divided by the donors, divided by the regions, and you can easily check it out. So how it was initiated, why it was prioritized, what kind of funds were used, and also basically who is implemented this project and how money goes.
Thank you, Sergey.
Yes,
just 1 minute to wrap up.
Yes. Coming to the end, basically that it's not only about the procedures in terms of the digitalizing. We have the Agency of Reconstruction, who actually did a good job, because this is the agency which actually operates with the biggest projects in Ukraine, and they have their own methodologies, very transparent in total, shown even the prices for each of the contract. So I will not go to the details here. I'm just saying that the whole procedure from the state perspective in terms of recovery and reconstruction right now is very much well thought, from the strategic level to the very detailed level to each of the price of each of the material which is used for recovery and reconstruction. So I actually want to one more time lastly thanks all the partners, because it's really very much joint effort to make it happen. So
I like very much when you started talking about trust, honestly, because I think this is one of those enablers of recovery, alongside European Union integration, because that will be a big driver, but also modernization of institutions that not only has to deliver fast, but to deliver, quality. People want quality. So sometimes in Ukraine, people confuse inefficiency with corruption, and we have to be very clear. What are we talking about? Poor governance, bad quality, or actually embezzlement of funds. So thanks so much for also bringing these action points specifically. And we'll talk more about it. But moving to Alan, because you are, I understand, helping a lot, both the Agency of Restoration and also the Ministry, to kind of think up and operationalize tools that will enable integrity. So what are some of the successes working in Ukraine, and what still remains to be done? Because we want to leave this conference understanding where we should focus our political attention and resources. Alan.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the question, Owisha, and thanks for your introduction. I need to add that also the Danish government is funding the UACI.
I mentioned European Union, sorry,
Exactly.
didn't single
Yes.
out.
I think my point of departure for trying to answer your question is the work we are doing in the city of Mykolaiv, and with the ministry and with the Agency of Restoration. And just a few words about that. With the Mykolaiv city, we have been working since summer 22. And we share the ambition of the mayor to, in Mykolaiv, develop the best practices for how to do transparent reconstruction, with a view to replicating some of these practices to other cities in the same situation as Mykolaiv. And with the ministry and with the agency, we are assisting in putting in place a framework for the reconstruction process that live up to values like integrity, transparency, accountability. So coming back to your question, I think if I start with the challenges, I will mention three, probably many more, but three are actually, I think, very important. First is that we shouldn't forget Ukraine is still struggling with some structures and procedures in the public sector, not least at the local level, where you have some issues that needs to be tackled. It's, for instance, public procurement. We are so fond of talking about the Prosoro platform. It's also a very fantastic system, but if the data you insert is not correct, or if the procurement processes are not in order, then you have an issue. We see that in the cities where we're working. Management of municipal-owned enterprises, another area where improvement is needed. The area of financial control and audit, I think it's almost an issue for each city we are working with. Lack of capacity, lack of proper procedures in place. So these are areas where reforms are needed. Then I would mention the lack of capacity, human resources. That was mentioned many times yesterday in different panels, that this is really an issue for the reconstruction and the bottleneck. It also has an impact on the work of preventing corruption, because we also lack financial experts, procurement experts, people working with compliance. That's really an issue. Finally, I think we could say that somehow we lack strategic framework. I know Sergei just mentioned that we're actually very far with the strategy work, but I think the issue is that a lot of public actors are involved in reconstruction, cities, oblast, ministries, the agency, and that's good. I understand why, but it also means that you don't have the same approach. There are different ways to do public procurement. There are different ways of prioritizing projects. I think that the mayor of Mykolaiv said yesterday in the panel that there needs some more synchronization. I think that's perhaps a good expression to use. Coming to the greatest successes, and here I will start with yeah.
I'm sorry that you only 1 minute for successes, you know.
Okay, I will be brief then.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. First thing is, I think a precondition is to have the right leadership in place. You need to have a leadership that, on the one hand, are aware of the corruption risks, and on the other hand, see it as an opportunity to do things differently with the reconstruction process. Establish new structures, procedures, more transparency, integrity. We see that in Mykolaiv, and we have seen that in our cooperation with the ministry and with the agency. And Sergei is a very good representative of that. Then we have the decentralization reforms, I think also mentioned many times yesterday, but actually it's also a way of preventing corruption, because you have decision power out there close to the citizens, close to those that need to keep the politicians, decision makers accountable. And then the final thing is the digital platforms. We will hear more about DREAM. It's really a fantastic tool. We are having a presentation at the recovery forum here of a national GIS system for regional reconstruction and development that is also a good supplement to the DREAM system. And also at the local level, we are delivering different digital tools, including a web portal on monitoring international aid in Mykolaiv, that all are creating transparency, and we know transparency is the best way to prevent corruption.
Thank you very much, Alan. I think what is great is that you are expanding through these tools the broadband of information that must be available to understand the scale and the problem, because you know we are in the uncharted waters, to be honest, because Ukraine is still fighting the war, at the same time is trying to integrate with the European Union, at the same time is trying to build, you know, to change internal societal way of doing business. So it's very, very complex, and this complexity of multiple efforts, it doesn't help. You know, you need a bit of streamlining. But yeah, I'm sure Victor will bring it on. But now moving on to Olena, representing Ukrainian civil society, which, you know, I'm also proud that I was able to do this survey, that some of those copies are here, but a lot of them are online, where we in Chatham House asked actually civil society organizations, and more than 200 participated in it, what are the main risks to recovery? And again, it's risk perception. It doesn't mean that it's happening, but number one is war. War prevents, you know, in many ways. But number two, equally, roughly 74%, embezzlement of funds. And at the regional level, which I was struck, it's even higher than war. Okay, people feel that's a risk. And local capacity, what you're talking about, it's much lower, it's 38%. But you can dig into some of this online, and I'm happy to share information. But Olena, what are you worried about moving forward, where we should be paying attention to ensure that these risks actually do not come true?
Thank you very much. And I'll actually start with your first risk, war, because we have to realize that we are at the survival mode currently. And we will be talking a lot about the digital tools. They are very important, but if we do not have electricity, if Ukraine is fall into blackout, none of those tools will be effective and practical. So that's why it's super important to have the energy system fixed, to have the air defenses, to have the confiscation of Russian assets in order to fund that. And I'm very happy that this is being raised and discussed at this conference. Also, I'm truly very happy that we have a lot of the representatives of the local communities, because having local communities conveying the message to the international partners makes this whole story absolutely different. Just 2 months ago, I took part in the forum about democracy, where there were a lot of representatives of the Nordic states, and there were people from the Sumy region, very close to the front line, and the head of the amalgamated community was sitting next to me at the stage, and when he was talking about transparency, democracy, and all these important values, Russians shelled his community with grad. And he explained this to the donors, and I think that it was very important for them to realize what are actually the priorities of survival. But when we come back to the main topic of this panel, what can be done, we have a couple of ideas that can be implemented, and the first one is that we think that it's important to open up all of the construction breakdown costs, because that would help to make maximum transparency and ensure the tools of oversight for the investigative journalists and the civil society, since that would limit the possibility to include the corruption margin into different cost breakdowns that are usually hidden behind the large figure of, let's say, rebuilding the school or building the new road. If we speak about DREAM, it's an amazing tool. It's very important to sustain it into the legislation and make it obligatory, because that was basically the only reason why we succeeded to save Prozoro when the vested interests tried to take the system down, particularly because it was part of the legislation. It's very important that local communities cooperate with local NGOs and investigative journalists and are transparent enough to share the information before the investigations or the corruption scandals appear on the local level, which brings additional unnecessary tensions in the communities. That's why the public hearings and public consultations about the prioritization of the projects would be very welcome and very effective. And last but not least, not the one before the last.
Yeah, just in 2 minutes.
I'll manage in 1 minute. It's very important that local communities hear the needs of the people, and they basically set the priorities according to those needs. What I mean, when the local communities, budget the rebuilding of the stadiums, when people are expecting the drones to be bought, of course, that kind of also creates additional tensions. This doesn't mean that all of the procurements have to be war-related. We realize that there are a lot of civilian purposes, but the right prioritization and hearing what the society needs is very important. And last, the request to the national government is that we have to be very serious reforming our law enforcement agencies and establishing the real rule of law in order to make sure that those agencies are not used in order to abuse those local communities that are not favored by office of the president or the national government.
Thank you, Elena. And I can confirm that there is a real demand for these tools among Ukrainian NGOs and civil society sector, where, again, here in the survey, I was asked, what is your main added value? And 70% said we want to do civic monitoring and watchdog to ensure that, the money is spent in the interest of public good. So they will be very much used, I think, if people are properly trained and they understand how prioritization happens. And maybe, this is something where, for example, Zhytomyr understand how prioritization that you set up takes place, and civil society understand. So we need to connect. And is DREAM connected to these priorities the way they were set up in the World Bank? So, Victor, if we go to you to ask, because you work in the intersection of, government, civil society, private sector, you are now in the process of designing a new institution, you can say. It hopefully will become, like Prozoro, a state company that will run the DREAM system, that will fire this recovery process. So what needs to happen with DREAM now? Maybe say a little bit what it is, and then what is its future?
Thanks. First, I would start with probably another 30% of civil society who is not going to monitor and watchdog reconstruction now, but probably is focused on capacitating local communities, supporting with project preparation and so on. Because first we have to focus on our, let's say, capacity to develop projects, to implement those projects. And of course, by design, it should be monitored, it should be transparent, and watchdogs should do their job. But it's not only about transparency, accountability, and corruption. It's also about efficiency and capacity. For example, Berlin Airport, right? It was delayed for 9 years. Was it super efficient? I don't know how much corruption was there, but if Ukrainian reconstruction is delayed for 9 years, will we survive? Starting from energy and so on. So Ukraine have to work with so many challenges now, but of course focusing on transparency, accountability, and anti-corruption. If we're speaking about what DREAM is now, I'll give you an example on our most recent experience with Ministry of Education subvention allocation. Ministry of Education has 2.5 billion hryvnias, roughly like $60 million US, to support schools with shelters construction. It sets eligibility, qualification, and prioritization criteria. Its structure is through DREAM, clearly defining on a data level, on a very granular level, who is eligible, which projects considered to be qualified, how they will be qualified, and then how priority will be calculated based on multiple parameters, what Sergei mentioned as well, including cost efficiency, including number of children in every school, and so on and so forth. So local communities receive notification that there is new funding source available in DREAM, and they can respond to that call for applications. For new local communities, I'll be honest, it might be complicated, because if you're just starting working with a new tool, it's not always that simple. But there is an example of Mykolaiv when they were able to submit an application from train in less than 10 minutes, because they did a good job working with the project preparation previously. So all those communities submit their applications through DREAM system, and they go through 2 steps. First is recommendations by regional administrations. So all regional administrations in their account in DREAM see the list of submitted applications with all the additional data, like number of children automatically collected from Ministry of Education registry, design documentation, when it was developed, who was expert behind that design documentation, when it was approved, whether there is a permission to start construction, and lots of other details automatically collected from many systems. So regional administrations provide recommendations through the system to the Ministry of Education, and Ministry of Education, as a next step, reviews all applications based on ranking and recommendations from regions, and quickly approves makes their decision. So this worked well. Now 50 shelters supported through DREAM thanks to this process. And as a next step, with monitoring, we track all the procurement, all the payments made automatically. So the only thing Hromada is doing, they submit procurement plan ID from Prozoro, and then system does everything itself.
And this is budget funds you were spending, or was some donors?
It was budget funds, yes. And they are submitting regular updates on what's happening on the construction site, technical supervision, and so on and so forth. And in business intelligence, on the public portal, we see how every project is implemented, whether there are any delays, whether there are any complaints. DREAM is connected to Big Recovery Portal, for example, civil society initiative that is monitoring those tenders as an independent review, who also can submit complaints and so on. So it's already a functioning ecosystem. It not always only works with state budget. We are about to launch call for applications for World Bank funding, or as a HOPE project to support housing reconstruction. So next week, Ministry for Restoration is launching it to follow absolutely transparent, smart process without human intervention, as Sergei was mentioning. So it is already operational. More than 1,000 local hromadas working with the system, submitting more than 5,000 projects. And there are also, yes, there are also international partners who are committing to this. So for example, Denmark, it's now basically submitting all the projects it supports in Mykolaiv city and region to DREAM. So every Danish taxpayer can check how international support is utilized in Ukraine. Okay. What we need to do next? Olena rightly mentioned that we need to sustain DREAM, right? And for that, of course, legislation is needed. Luckily, DREAM is included in Public Investment Management Reform Roadmap. Actually, this week, government has to adopt action plan to implement that reform roadmap. At least from what I know now, DREAM is part of that action plan. And for September, there are plans to add it to like legislation.
Okay.
So hopefully everything will be all right. But
we'll
of course,
we'll be watching. Everybody
attention.
check that the DREAM is in place, because obviously you're trying to connect all these dots between the budget funds, donor funds, local community projects, transparency. It's I think it has a good chance of being this new public investment management tool, and perhaps good for other countries, like for export, like Prozora is now.
Dream Summit in DC, that's something
Dream
that we are
Summit in
preparing
DC.
for sure. But one important remark, it's a unique initiative that's unique for the world probably, but pretty standard for Ukraine.
Okay.
When Ukraine follows co-governance principle, cooperating between civil society, government of Ukraine, international partners, and like we have an amazing cooperation with many organizations, including Kyiv Regional Administrations, who is leading the DREAM, I would say, but I hope that
it's
we
a
will hear
perfect
more.
pass to Ruslan, you know, and he'll perhaps say from the regional level, right? Because also civilian military administrations became military civilian administrations. It's a kind of new thing in Ukrainian system because of the martial law. I mean, again, as Olena reminded us all, we are at war. It's not peacetime. Ukraine is taking these measures to enforce things in a different way, and you also have a law enforcement background, which is very important to bring to the table today, because there's this formula of corruption we used in one of our papers where corruption equals monopoly plus discretion minus accountability. So what about this accountability part? Are you confident that Ukrainian law enforcement system and you at your level can track it on time and make people accountable if they cross the red lines?
Добрий день всім, дякую за
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor to be here and to represent my city. What we've done in the Kyiv region, we are really proud of what we have done. After the deoccupation, there were 29,000 different objects which were destroyed, and we managed to rebuild 17,500 of these different assets. Of course, we need to be accountable, we need to be transparent, everyone needs to see how we are spending these funds, how every cent is being spent. But of course, we need to build trust. And why do we need to build trust? Trust is something that needs to be built, something that needs to be earned. When we started, we had no trust. When you are a civil servant, it doesn't mean you have automatically trust. You need to earn this trust, you need to build it. Our colleagues mentioned today that we have implemented different measures, anti-corruption measures, and all of these measures are implemented to have more accountability. In Kyiv region, we have implemented several measures, and these are multi-level measures which we have implemented, and all of them are meant to have more transparency and more accountability. So what we have created unified tender systems. So every tender description follows the same structure. We have a template, and every contractor, every builder has access to it, and they all can prepare using this template. So we've worked on this with UNDP. They have supported us in designing these templates, and this is how we have started this whole process. And what we have created next, we also have created a council for oversight. So this is a council which consists of media, also of civil society, of Transparency International, of UNDP representatives, and also several other organizations. There is no civil servant from the region administration there. The parliament can also take a look at all of these documents. We can all ask questions, and we are reporting to this council, but this council is independent. No one is influencing their work, and they can also inform law enforcement agencies if it's needed. What we have also created, we have a task force for accountability and transparency. We have also various representatives from all law enforcement agencies in the Kiev region and in the entire Ukraine. We are providing all of the necessary documents. We're also working closely with the law enforcement agencies, and they are supporting us to be more transparent and more accountable. And I have created a decree. This is something unique for Ukraine. All representatives of communities are working on one goal, and therefore we are providing all of the documents to the law enforcement agencies. So we are providing access to all of it so that no additional approvals are needed.
No, we are taking care of all the requests for law enforcement agencies not to waste time. We want to make sure that large public and law enforcement agencies can have access to all the documents, so it's done fully transparently. Apart from that, when it comes to international donors, I believe that to secure trust, we need to have an impartial observer to be in place that enjoys the trust of the entire world. We engaged the United Nations, and it acts as an independent observer in all reconstruction projects. That's United 24, that's 18 multi-apartment blocks that were reconstructed with their assistance, then schools. Then we engaged them in a reconstruction of around 100 objects. They exercise audit when it comes to financial reporting books and TOR's performance. Everything is subject to their audit. Jointly within fiscal department, we created a dashboard that looks like a dream system, basically at first sight. But what we did is just uploaded all the projects that are being reconstructed and supported by a regional budget, public budget, donor funds. So looking at this map, and it's available on the website, you can see who allocated money, who earmarked funds, what is reconstructed, who is doing that. All the detailed information is there. And the last thing, we are using DREAM very intensely. I studied BEAM system, and you know that it was created with the idea to remain transparent when it comes to every processes from the preparation stage of the project until the final stage of it. So DREAM is a Ukrainian version of BEAM, and Kyiv Oblast is the one that employs the system to the most. As soon as we have the call for TOR and budgeting, everything is in the DREAM system. And the more information we have there, the better it is.
The diversity of those different tools, working group oversight, giving more information to public and law enforcement so that they can faster react to it. But now from the kind of regional level, which is, it's a big region, it's a Kyiv region, it has a special visibility because of the horrors that happened there, and you were in Bucha before, right? So a lot of emergency relief went in there, rightly so. But now we go to Zhytomyr, which is also not too far from Kyiv, to be honest. It's more central Ukraine. And Pani Svetlana, I wanted to ask you, Pani Svetlana will speak Ukrainian, so keep your headsets if you need them. What Victor said, that civil society is not only willing to monitor, actually a lot in the survey people say they want to do jointly, co-create projects of recovery. So from your experience, how is some of these systems are working, and how are they helping you to deliver for your citizens? Because you are the front line with them. You have to look in their eyes and say, what am I doing for their livelihoods?
Thank you very much for the question. We all understand that questions of transparency and accountability are questions of trust. And it's not only our international partners who raise this question. Every day, we look into people's eyes. We are the first to receive positive and negative reactions, also in the municipalities and communities. So for us, it's very important to ensure trust. When we speak about the city of Zhytomyr, starting from 2018, we had a unique opportunity to be part of the project Cities of Accountability, supported by EU governments and the UK government. So we could do more than the current legislation demands. When you do even more than it's expected of you, and people ask you to, you're inspired by your own work. So in terms of methodology, we first evaluated all risks when it comes to fund allocation. And then we went on to implement the measures. Another instrument was to develop a geoinformational system. When people request something, well, people are interested in something, so we think it's great to get people involved themselves. When people can log into something and use a digital system. So we have the systems Prozoro, the system Dream in Ukraine. So in the beginning, as members of the administration, we might be worried to introduce something new, but then we understand that it's not about worrying, it's about facilitating our work in the administration. Our informational system has 7 layers. It's the entire information on municipal assets, on waste management, etc. This is interesting to our citizens. They're interested in who does this work. It's a huge amount of information, and everyone can access this and look into it, and which assets their municipality owns. And then we have our municipal companies. They receive state funds and give services to our community members. Our critical infrastructure participates in international partner projects. There are international audits. We have chosen one health service provider for this. They receive aid, and it was very important for us to ensure accountability. Currently, we have seen 2 excellent examples of work, 2 excellent methodologies, and we know that we have to merge this with other municipal companies because those are excellent examples. In terms of integrity, we have to deal with challenges by the war, have to ensure transparency of fund spending. 1 minute, please. When we speak about tackling corruption, I don't think this is an issue. The challenge for the municipalities is to ensure transparency and accountability because we have our prosecution services for everything else. When you look into the city of Zhytomyr and how they use funds, this corresponds 100% to the transparency on the municipal level. We have to be transparent and accountable. It makes working with international organizations much easier. We are one of the first communities who are leading in those processes, so we can implement everything. And the city of Zhytomyr is part of a European initiative.
The ingredients that you need to push such a difficult agenda because it's swimming against the tide, you know? There's old ways of doing things, and you need to break that system, and it's cultural change. I think a lot of what we're talking about, it's not just passing the law, it's perhaps easier, but this cultural change about what it means to service citizens, what it means to have integrity, you know, what's Ukrainian word even in integrity? I'm trying to think, Доброчесність. I think it's even like a new word for many Ukrainians, well, do they know this word? So, Anne, you're and if I may say so, an outsider. Like me, I am an outsider. I don't live in Ukraine, but I watch Ukraine. I come to Ukraine. You work in Ukraine on the ground. You have your team there. How does this discussion looks to you, perhaps compared to other places where you work? What do you see in Ukraine that perhaps inspires you, and maybe there's something that worries you that you can bring now to this table?
Thank you, and just want to thank the hosts for inviting me to this incredible panel who are doing this very difficult work. So CORE is an international nonprofit organization doing humanitarian relief around the world. We're in Haiti and Sudan, as well as United States cities, and a number like India and Pakistan, as well as in Ukraine. And one thing that's very clear is that there's not a single country that is untouched by corruption. So in that sense, we are part of a group. We're not alone, basically, in Ukraine. And as we've heard today, our incredible panelists have discussed so much of the processes, the systems, and the tools that are really needed to combat corruption. And as you just mentioned, I think the other side that we feel very strongly about is changing the culture. That is the software that we find that is very important to tackle. In places where corruption is very high, it's become a part of regular business activities. It's added on sort of the bottom line and in your budgeting processes. And in very extreme cases, in some places that we work, not partaking in corruption is almost dumb because everyone else is doing it, and therefore you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. So at every level, though, we've seen in those extreme cases how much it erodes social capital and the trust that really underpins every single social interaction that we have as not just an economy, but as a society. And it's what we need to be a cohesive and healthy community. So changing culture, as you mentioned, and building norms is what we feel strongly about is needed to complement what you all have been discussing, which is the hardware, but it's also very difficult. So organizations like us, I think we're in a very unique position because we work so closely with communities, with local government, national government, and with the private sector. These are very key sectors that are needed to, again, support a community to thrive. And so we think that the intersection where they meet is where we can make the most difference as a nonprofit and international organization, and sometimes as outsiders. And we played this role a lot, for example, in U.S. cities, especially during COVID. So many communities, marginalized communities of color, did not trust the government. They saw the government as corrupt and abusive. And we played that role to bring them together. In Haiti, where we've worked for about 14 years, we know that there's a lot of money that has gone to recovery, and we play a very important role to kind of bridge that gap. So I think that as an international organization, we need to not just do the work in transparency, but have it mainstreamed and practiced and really upfront in everything that we do. And we can do this by incentivizing transparency with our partners at every sector, private, government, and community. For example, in Ukraine, we're working and liaising with the gramadas, the mayors, the ministries, and in like every other country, sometimes there is the shadow of corruption that hangs in the air. And rather than shy away from it, our organization and our incredible team have been very active to discuss it, to bring it out into the light, and visibly celebrate program implementation that is done transparently, giving credit to our partners so that there is incentives to work transparently. And there's been no shortage of incredibly self-committed and sacrificing leaders that we get to work with here in Ukraine. So for that, we're extremely grateful. And one last note that I just want to end on that I think I've kind of heard a little bit in this discussion that we haven't touched on, which is we are in an emergency situation still. And we are used to working in emergency crises. So often these systems and processes, which are very bureaucratic, run a little bit of friction with the need to be able to work quickly, flexibly, and provide decision-making processes to communities. So how do we do that when we have so many bureaucratic processes of filling out documentation and all of these things? And our recommendation and what we've done is really making sure that those processes can be lightened in certain cases when urgency and emergencies are very much present. But that is all done in policy and explained beforehand so that when we lighten the bureaucracy and fast track and fast track through the bureaucracy, it's expected, it's not seen as being out of the norm, but it allows us to take more risks, to act quickly and flexibly, which is so needed even now in this crisis. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Anne. We didn't agree beforehand, but speaking on culture, but also speaking on celebrating success. I mean, in my paper, I actually recommend highlighting good practices and celebrating it, because corruption gets the headlines from Guardian to Financial Times, but kind of a good story rarely makes it to the front page, and we need to, because there is a material. It's not like we're inventing something. Things are happening, but we'll now open a floor to discussion. We have a good 20 minutes, so just start thinking about your questions and raise your hands. And when you do that, please introduce yourself. It would be great if you can direct the question to a particular speaker. If it's just a general comment, we'll be playing along, seeing who is best positioned to answer it. But just want to say that it's so important that on the national level, you set the tone. Because, I don't know what's the English saying, but in Ukraine we say «Риба гниє з голови». So it all starts there. You know the English translation of it? Yeah. So we'll comment. It's so important that we set the tone at the national level, that there's a leadership, that there is guidelines or framework that enables people to be honest, and then at the regional level and at the municipal level, it kind of fits all in the system. 1 second comment and then we'll
Quick
go.
comment.
Yeah.
I would say not on the national level, but on international level. Because when we're speaking about transparency, and Olena mentioned that Ukraine is now advocating for disclosure of bill of quantities with detailed price, it often happens that international organizations cannot even disclose the total cost of the contract, not even mentioning bill of quantity with aggregated prices. So let's first set the tone internationally.
You're right. And next time in Italy, when the next conference, I don't know if it's announced or not, or am I breaking some news? But anyway, next URC conference, we want to also have companies here, because they're also players. It's not just government, civil society, but it's private sector. And we have an international organization, but maybe not a big international donor, that sometimes there's also corruption in their practices. So I'd like to open the floor, and I see some hands. Yes, here in the front row. If you can have yeah, go ahead. And then lady over there, and then there. Yeah. If you can please stand up, maybe people can see.
Dear colleagues, please raise. Good day, dear colleagues. I'm the head of the Kharkiv City Council and head of the Council of Cities of Ukraine. Would like to make a brief comment. Ukraine not only deals with war and victory. The next question is recovery. And third is finishing the decentralization reform and tackling corruption. So we have 4 key aspects on which the entire team of Ukraine are working. We can talk about tackling corruption, transparency, accountability, integrity, but the human factor is really important. Humans need to understand that corruption is an embarrassment in view of our international partners. Colleagues present here today, our representatives of central governments, international partners, have been talking about measures taken by Ukraine to tackle corruption, to make everything transparent and with integrity. We've been talking about the system of DREAM. Every region creates council to deal with transparency. There are anti-corruption programs in all regions in order to conduct transparent procurement and to make our people see transparency of the government, both local and regional. I cannot say that we have many mayors, many heads of regional administrations who have been accused of corruption. That's important. Our international partners have to know this. But in the Kharkiv region, there is also Mayor of Lozova from the Kharkiv region. For the 5th time, we have been conducting a tender for certain work, for education, for healthcare, and nobody shows up to conduct those projects. There are such cases. Maybe other regions are in a different situation, but I wanted to mention this. Today, I think that our mayors, our heads of military administrations, our president are showing that we not only combat our Russian enemy, but we want to banish the word of corruption from Ukraine, and I'm sure that this will happen in Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Oh, you just took off the red scarf, so.
Marie-Karin von Gumpenberg, Partnership for Transparency Europe. We are an offspring of Transparency International. We partner with civil society to fight corruption. We currently started a project monitoring reconstruction projects in smaller communities. My concrete question is, can you please provide concrete examples how civil society can be engaged in monitoring, at which level? We have heard already that civil society is engaged in assisting municipalities in writing projects, that they also assist municipalities in stakeholder engagement, really to reach out to the communities to prioritize jointly. Please provide concrete examples about
they can do? Okay.
what the tools they are using.
Okay, we'll come back to the panel. We'll take one more comment from the floor, and then I'll go on this side and on this side. Yes.
Yeah. Good morning. My name is Rebecca Harms. I'm a former member of the European Parliament, and I worked in Ukraine for nearly 2 decades with quite different parts of society, with civil society, with Verkhovna Rada, with the government, different governments, prime ministers, ministers, even with the big energy companies. And I must say, I agree totally with what has been presented as a perfect system for watchdogs and processes, but I'm not sure whether this is enough to pave the way to better procurement and to continue the fight against corruption in Ukraine. Recently, we had a big event here in Berlin, and we wanted to tell a very positive story together with Artyom Sitnik. Yeah? So he was the first prosecutor to lead NABU. He was not allowed to travel to Berlin to present the success story of NABU. So how comes? So the day before the conference, I get information that some of these trusted reform forces who dared to enter the institutions and are leading Ukrainian institutions like Mustafa Nayem and his deputies responsible until last week for recovery and reconstruction are not allowed to travel to Berlin. So if we do not manage to build up in Ukraine trusted institutions, if civil society is always needed as a watchdog and the institutions are not really fundamentally changing, and people are kicked out who are trusted, then I fear that we are going into a very, very difficult period. And I would like to know what Ukrainians think about this development and how we can, together with the Ukrainians who have the responsibility for this, how we can end irresponsible developments in Kiev. Thanks.
Thank you, Rebecca. We'll come to that. Well, first, easier maybe question. We'll start with the tools of. Yeah, okay. Well, first, I'll give you a floor, Ruslan. First, we'll go to Olena to say, do you feel that there are enough tools? What kind of tools? If you can give a couple of ideas of civil society engagement and monitoring of recovery.
Well, I can, but disclaimer that my NGO is not very actively working currently on the restoration, except this work on the cost breakdowns, which we advocate to be adopted. But I think that we have a very good case, which was the case of corruption on the procurement in the Ministry of Defense, and which caused, of course, a big scandal. It happened last winter, not this one, but the previous one. But it's very important to understand that how corruption is handled and how which changes those corruption scandals trigger. And if there are systemic follow-up changes, then it is the way how the government addresses the problem and proves the sincerity to the society and to the international partners. And with this MOD procurement thing, it helped to trigger the changing of the legislation on the lethal and non-lethal procurement, and the new agencies were basically built from scratch for both, these types of procurements, and presently those agencies are getting traction of their work, and they are starting to deliver a very concrete results. So what we are trying to convey as the message, as you, Orisa, mentioned, that the scandals about corruption, they are making the headlines, but it's very important. I mean, the scandal makes the headline, but then we are having trial, which is, then we have pre-trial investigation, then we have the trial, which is a super long, sophisticated, and journalists or international community are not following that. So it's super important to understand that while we have certain issues, and of course we have corruption problems, but it's very important that we properly address, and there is public hunger, and to follow up on those cases. And another, from my perspective, very important thing which Ukrainian society did manage to achieve regarding electronic asset declaration. Since the beginning of the full-scale war, the system was closed, but it proved to be one of the most effective systems where all of the public officials had to report on their incomes and assets, their family members, and plenty of other important property-related issues. And international community demanded this system to be restored, but to be closed. And it was upon the pressure from the civil society. There was the petition submitted to the president, which collected 83,000 signatures over 2 days. That was an absolute record in order to make the system open. So the president vetoed this law and returned it back to the parliament and opened e-declaration system, which is a important preventive tool. So, I mean, maybe colleagues have some other cases.
I see that Victor wanted to add something on perhaps dreams as a tool for... No, but let's finish on this civil society participation and then go on a bigger kind of... Yeah, you also welcome.
Okay. But,
we still have 10-15 minutes, so we will... Okay.
Great, I'll be quick, but first I want to say thank you to Sergei, head of Lozivska Hromada, for their work in DREAM, and while being absolutely, transparent, it's an example of Hromada that shows how it should be, even if you are regularly under shelling and so on. And it actually reflects on my first comment that yes, we have to work on our absorption capacity, because when no one shows up on your procurement, how you will rebuild and sustain your громада. Speaking about tools and transparency, we have lots of tools, starting from, I'm sure Ruslan will speak about Fiscal Transparency Center and amazing work of Viktor Mazarchuk, but we have business intelligence run by Transparency International Ukraine that shows every public procurement. We have big recovery portal and community behind that calculates risks on recovery project and runs civil society monitoring management system where you actually can file reports and attract lawyers to enforce those reports. We have Clarity project. It's a unique data, let's say, ecosystem that collects lots of different information and presents it in a user-friendly interface for civil society. We have a great tool called UControl. It's a private tool, but it's free for civil society and investigative media. And it does amazing job for due diligence, all links connection. You can easily analyze potential collusion and bid rigging, etc. So tools are there. What is challenging now, of course, also because of the war, is actual civil society, right? We have to support them. We have to provide more resources, and we have to actually, support Ukrainian leadership in this, because Ukrainian NGOs are, I would say, one of the best in this process. So let's not train them how to do the job. Let's empower them to do the job.
You're absolutely right. So now let's move to this bigger question of institutions. And I know that Ruslan and you three also wanted to comment. And we'll start with... Okay, come on, let's start with you.
Thank you very much. Let me respond to the two questions raised. How civil society can cooperate and exercise the monitoring over us, and about NABU. So NABU is conducting oversight of our organization. So let me respond to two questions. And I use a specific example. That's construction of a military object. And, that's a partly classified information, but let me tell what has been done. All contractors that were engaged in the process were subject to verification and monitoring by law enforcement agencies. Only then they started working on that. Then when it comes to budgeting and design documents, we referred that to the verification of the commission to see whether the prices are accurate and not inflated. Then we referred that to forensic lab, or rather we hired the person who exercised technical monitoring over the process, the entire process. Then we went to another institute that specializes in that and requested their services to audit the financial reports. So the service agreement will not be signed until the construction inspection is conducted. So NABU and security service were engaged, and they did their they did their bid depending on the mandate. We also have the Oversight Council made of the anti-corruption organizations and journalists. We ask them, let's find golden middle here. On the one hand, we have lots of confidential information. On the other hand, there is a demand for transparency. So we received the clearance from the security service. We brought them to the specific object. We provided technical documentation, financial reporting. They analyzed that, and jointly with the anti-corruption organizations operating in Ukraine, they are going to produce the report about joint activity. That would include financial report and also the analysis of the budget appropriated.
Regions? Чи такі ради існують в інших регіонах?
Я знаю, що
We were the first. I don't know if somebody followed our example. I'm not the person to respond to that. And then about NABU. We've been cooperating with these agencies. We are all engaged in reconstruction, so we work jointly there. So that's interaction and cooperation. With respect to NABU, that's the only state institution agency that is in charge of investigating anti-corruption, investigating corruption-related cases. So the case that I referred to, that's where we cooperate. We collect all the reports and refer them to NABU. And NABU is the authority that is going to analyze all of that.
Very shortly on both. The first question was from the Transparency International, I think. I would actually ask you question, what is the purpose? Because answering this question, we can give you the answer, the precise answer. Because, I mean, if you're asking about the precise tools of watchdogging, my colleagues, Victor and colleagues actually mentioned how you want to get information. But I would actually, if I may, to advise you from our perspective, we today speak about the local municipalities and about the capacity of local municipalities. Transparency International has lots of experience. We have good Ukrainian office here, and you have internationally wise lots of experience. So from this perspective, if the aim is actually to help and to support some of the communities, so then it's good actually to have a connection with the community, and if you need it, we as the ministry can be a bridge, to walk you into the community, and then you will start the whole procedure, like looking at the policies and procedures, and you will ask to present how the projects are implemented, what the policies you have, how compliance works, and then the instrument. So it's not only about the particular instrument which would help you, it's basically about the aim, what you want to help. And if you have a broader perspective, if you want to really help, that's we can ensure that we can make it happen. So thanks for support. Your question was really very good, but I would, if I may, break it down on two, because your first note was basically about that there is a corruption anyway in Ukraine. Being in Ukraine. Okay, maybe I misunderstood it. One comment, maybe it wasn't your point. I will go to the political sustainability first and secondly. But first note, as I have heard, that you mentioned that we see anyway corruption here in Ukraine. One thing that I want to actually to speak to all of you, actually, it's about the trust. We started about the trust. And I actually want to speak with all of the international partners about the trust into Ukraine. There are lots of stuff which are going on in Ukraine. Even sometimes we hear that, oh, you have a dream, but still probably there might be a corruption because it's Ukraine. So this is the perception that we need to change. And we definitely work a lot with the international partners and locally within to eliminate corruption. And we have the much more comprehensive systems than in other countries, actually, for the procurement procedures or for the construction projects. Much more comprehensive and much more transparent and open. If it wasn't the case, sorry, it was the point. In terms of the political, if I may, just one short note, because I may not comment very much deeply into the topic, but I would say that we need to actually also divide the question about corruption and political interference, basically, and sustainability of the management of the state institutions, and actually, let's say, effectiveness and really stability of the institutions in terms of the management and in terms of the sustainability of the whole strategies that are going on. And they would not influence all the procedures and processes. So that's true. I mean, somehow it doesn't help, but it's not about corruption. That's what my actually point was.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, if we're talking about the specific situation with the leadership in the Agency of Restoration, the story is playing out. We still don't know the end of it. We're in the middle of it, and we will have to wait and see how the agency will continue its work, whether some of these processes will remain in place. It's an open-ended question right now, but I think there's a lot of, I would say, anxiety among partners and among civil society to make sure that it's in good hands of leadership, and that some of these processes that were investment by Western donors, right? We know that a lot of Western donors working with the agency are kept in place. So you wanted to comment, and then we will wrap up because there's another session in this room. And Svetlana, so ladies last, or should I say, and then we'll be closing up. Yeah.
I think that Rebecca's remark has also a very important kind of the international dimension, because any pressure on Ukrainian reformers are very badly perceived among international community, who are our main donors, and basically thanks to whom we can sustain our defense in this genocidal war. And our strength in the international arena is that we are democracy, which is doing reforms even during the full-scale war. That's something super unprecedented, and then that's something which basically meets a lot of sympathy coming from people. And in order to keep this solidarity, we have to do all those things and avoid any unpleasant stories. Because there are very many people who are seeking for the excuses to stop supporting Ukraine. We shouldn't be helping them. And it's important that Ukrainian government is predictable, accountable, and efficiently working and cooperating with the international community in order for our friends to also explain to their societies why they should continue supporting Ukraine and help eventually our
Thank
victory.
you, Lan. Very good point. Yes.
I just want to add 1 second, because we've seen what happens when there's an erosion of trust in countries. Haiti, after the earthquake, got the most funding it has ever seen, and since then has not been able to get the sort of attention, trust, and support because of the corruption. So it does have a huge impact that has long-lasting effects.
Світлана?
Я б ще хотіла відкоментувати.
Let me talk a little bit about the civil society. When we talk about the development of civil society, we have to understand that similar to local self-government, that's all about capacity building. If in the central level capacity is kind of clear, there is access to information, to resources, to information partners that is there and bigger. At the regional level, we do understand that increasing capacity at the regional level takes more time, and it's a much more complex process. So for us, for the communities, it's much more easier to work with capable civil society that provides for sustainability in approaches and sustainability in the processes. Whether the cities or civil society, we are moving in the same direction to achieve the goals of the communities, set in the communities. So when it comes to the information, so there are lots of systems, they are all open, but capacity to analyze that, so there is an issue there.
War because of displacement, because of immigration. So like all other sectors, business, government, civil society is impacted, and we all are, you know, I think there's one of you said Team Ukraine. Didn't you say Team Ukraine? One of us. I think Team Ukraine is something that can win in this war, because it's very asymmetric battle between this David and Goliath, and Ukraine is like this, you know, David that has to be inventive, that has to do more than what is necessary by law, what you said. It has to go an extra mile. And I think all of you in your different capacities are contributing to this. I know one thing that, and why I think Ukraine is fascinating. I'm sure Anne will say that. This is the country of possible. I mean, yes, sometimes it feels dark. It feels like it's too many obstacles. But in the end, a lot of things were possible, are possible, and will be possible in Ukraine, because there are a lot of committed people, and Ukrainians, I know it, have great expectations from their country, and they will keep pushing, they will keep doing together with local government and national government, and I'm sure recovery will be a success, but we have to keep at it. And Slava Ukraini, and thank you for all your help. Thank you for the speakers. Join me in the round of applause.